Parliament. Congratulations for all of you who made it to find the room. And so we will, I'll start with presenting the agenda for the day. Before this, I first want to thank to the colleagues from Digit, with whom we are working since April in order to organize this, not only this event, but in general to work on the task force. So I want to thank to Tolis, who is also leading the ICT security work stream, and Kelly, who is really helpful with everything that we foresee or didn't foresee. Also to Luis, who is preparing basically almost everything that you see today. It went through his hands, and I want to thank also to Cecile, who is actually helping us she's our technician today. And I would like also to thank a lot to Maria, who is our keynote speaker today, and who actually did an amazing work back in 2017. But I guess you speak a little bit later about this. So let's start. For today, we have quite ambitious schedule. We will start with the keynote so that we can get tuned on the wave of the electronic signatures and related topics. And then we will explain the idea how we are going to work in different work groups today. Then we will have a break with today's coffee, which should be arriving soon, I hope. Then from 11:30 to 1 o'clock, we'll have the actual work. We will go through all the requirements and discuss about them. The details Tolis will present shortly before that. And then in the afternoon, we'll have the discussions and questions answered. And the late afternoon, we'll speak about the roadmap in front of us, so what will happen in the next months. So thank you again for being here. This is the first plenary meeting on site. So after the kickoff meeting on 18th of September, when most of you were connected remotely, it's for the first time when we are here today to spend hours in order to dedicate our time and our expertise on the topic. So, without any other delay, please your greetings to our keynote speaker, Maria.
Thank you very much, Todor. Thank you very much, Todor, and thank you all for being here. I understand you come from different institutions and agencies. Some of you have come from a far distance, or not so far, but from the distance. So thank you very much for being here. When Todor told me about giving this speech, I was a bit intimidated by the term keynote speech. Because at this stage, you all probably know much more than I do about electronic signature. You have already worked for a little bit about this together. This is your second session, as far as I understand. You all are kind of experts in one field or another that has to do with electronic signature. I understand there are lawyers, there are IT specialists, some security specialists probably. So you probably know more about the topic than me. So I asked Todor, what do you want me to tell them? Because I'm not sure I can actually teach them anything. And he told me that I could share my experience first as a legal advisor who was involved a little bit out of the blue in a pilot project that was a bit spontaneous and that nobody expected. And also I thought it could be fun or useful to also share with you my experience as a user, as a simple user. So I'm going to basically base my speech on those two things. One part, I'm going to tell you more or less how I see things, how I see things that in the sense of what is the outcome as a legal advisor in an institution I would expect from a group like this one. And then I could tell you from the substance itself as a user what I would like to have in that tool that you will come out with at the end of the works of this working group, of this task force. So that's why I have entitled my speech, Electronic Signature in the Institutions, What We Need from You. So my speech will be divided in 3 parts. The first part will be how I see the applicable rules in the current situation, how I see the implementation challenges that we could have, and what are the conclusions that I draw for those 2 things. So what do we need from this group as users of the institutions? Because that's the way I position myself. Many of the lawyers here, many of you are lawyers, and you are all familiar with the Kelsen pyramid and with the pyramid of norms. As regards electronic signature, we have a regulation for the member states that could be at the top of the pyramid. I'm simplifying big time because we know that the treaties are above and so on, but as regards electronic signature itself, so we have the EIDAS regulation, which actually rules pretty much in detail all the elements, technical and legal also, that are necessary for the member states to implement electronic signature. The purpose of the EIDAS, as we know, is the achievement of the internal market. So there was a very practical purpose for the Commission to develop this EIDAS regulation. Then they have developed their own national laws, so they have their own national regulations in the different levels of norms, and that below the level of properly legislative level, there are also policies, IT policies, or more practical rules that can be developed in technical matters at the level of the member states. At the level of the European institutions, I focus on the European Parliament because it's where I know, and this is what I realized the first time I saw the EIDAS regulation. I don't know if Todor has told you about how the situation was when we had to tackle the EIDAS regulation, no? So basically, our Secretary General visited Estonia before the presidency, as in a protocol visit. And the Prime Minister of Estonia told him that Estonia is a leading country as regards digitalisation of the public administration, and that he would like that during the upcoming Estonian presidency, the first legal act would be signed by electronic means. The Secretary General said, yes, of course. Yeah, that's going to be done, no problem. And then he came back and he asked us to implement that. Of course, we didn't have any legal base for that. It was not foreseen anywhere. We had to see also the technical aspects, the security aspects. But we had to figure out the way to do it because it had to be done during the Estonian presidency. So we built a team in DGI Tech with a security expert. The team was led by Todor, which is the technical expert. And then they asked for my help because there were also legal stakes that could be necessary to analyze and to assess as regards to the validity of the signature. And that was the first time I saw the EIDAS regulation. I have to say that to begin with, I've been doing IT law for already 7 years. That time it was 6 years. And I was a bit kind of used to translating from IT language to legal language. But when I read the EIDAS regulation the first time, I didn't understand anything. So I needed the help of my 2 other colleagues, so our security expert and Todor, to understand what actually the regulation was saying. I felt much more comfortable when I saw that they needed also each other's help to understand the part that was not within the scope of their expertise. And I realized that actually this matter, that was my first realization, if you want, that this matter can only be tackled in multidisciplinary teams, because we need to put together the expertise of the 3, especially those 3 fields of expertise, to be able to understand the stakes and to actually implement something useful. Then what happened is that when the first thing I did, as in a legal analysis you should do, is to analyze the scope of the EIDAS regulation, because we had started from the assumption that actually was applicable to the institutions. But I said, no, it's not always the case with the regulations that are applicable to the member states. And indeed, we realized that the EIDAS regulation is not applicable to the institutions. So the first thing we had to do is to see how we would do to apply the only rule we had, which was the EIDAS, because there was nothing else on electronic signing, how to apply to the European Parliament, to this case, a specific case. In this pyramid, for the European Parliament, I've put provisions, implementing rules, policies, but actually, at that time, there was nothing of that. The pyramid was empty. There was nothing at the top, nothing inside, no rules inside the Parliament to develop, to be able to know what was perceived as a valuable signature or whatever inside the institutions. So basically, in the end, we decided that we could inspire ourselves by the EIDAS regulation, and also because there was nothing else, and also that any individual signing was going to be an EU citizen, so the identification requirements for the EIDAS would be applicable to them as citizens. So that was the element that allowed us to use the EIDAS regulation. But actually, that was, as you know, I mean, that we could use for that particular case, but we could not. I mean, that's not the ideal thing to do for a general setting, and for everything we do in the institutions. So basically, we worked together. There was a working group that was created on the request of the Secretary General, and the institution developed, with the help also of the legal service, the provisions, and now it's working in the implementing rules and on policies. So since October 2017, which was the time where we ended up signing the first legal act, after 6 months of work on this. The signature lasted 5 seconds, I think. There's a video on that. Since then, we have been doing work in the Parliament about the legal framework and the regulatory framework we could use to implement electronic signature. But we are missing a key element, which is basically the regulation that would be applicable for all institutions. Because we have to work together, we need same regulation. For the ones who are familiar with the financial regulation or with the data protection regulation, you know very well that we have our own regulations that are different than the ones that regulations applicable to the member states, even if they are inspired or the substance is the same, but we need our own regulations because our administrative nature is different than the one of a member state. So basically, in the Parliament, we have started the house by the roof. It's perhaps not a good example, but we have developed the implementation rules and the implementing rules before having the top rule, which is actually the one that should inspire. So from a legal point of view, this is what we could expect from this group, to have this common framework to all of us that could be our point of reference from a legal point of view. This is very tiny, sorry. So this table has been provided by, it's a simplified version of the work that has been presented by Todor to me, which is the one you have in your shared wiki, in the collaboration space. So it might not be accurate or complete. It's basically a state of play of the situation in the different institutions. But Todor told me that it might be that some of your institutions do have those rules, but have not provided the information yet, and is not encoded in the share space. But it's more or less to have a picture on the holes that we could have as regards the rules that we need to implement electronic signing in the institutions. As we will see, the member states are very well off. They all have developed, because they have had the time also with the EIDAS regulation. Most of them, I don't have a detailed analysis of which member states is better off or worse off, but more or less all of them have had the time provided by the EIDAS regulation and have acted on time to do what the EIDAS regulation was requiring. For other institutions, we are missing certain aspects. So what are the implementation challenges? And this is when I tell you about my life. Not a long time ago, I needed to obtain a certificate from my local administration, the municipality of Madrid. I don't know if there are many Spaniards here. There are Spaniards here, yeah. I don't know if, perhaps you haven't had the same experience than me, and you are going to find it very extreme where I'm going to tell you. And I'm also exaggerating a little bit. So you see what was my despair in my parcours du combattant when I try to have just one paper, one document. But basically, I needed a certificate of having paid my real estate taxes for the year 2018. So I called the information center, the information number we have in the municipality, and they told me that I could obtain it via the internet with an electronic signature. Yeah, they said electronic signature, or with going in person to the offices. And I was in Brussels. So I could not go in person to the office, and it was pretty urgent. So I said, okay, now it's time for me to do the electronic signature. I cannot avoid. Until now, I have to confess that I had had rather panic reactions when I had to deal with these kind of things with the Spanish administration, because it was much too complex for me, everything. And I never managed to do everything that was necessary to obtain these kinds of things. I never knew exactly my way around in the different kinds of identification, electronic identification the administration was using. So when I went to the state administration, I mean to the federal administration, to the country administration, they were requiring certain identifications, and then when I did the local, it was different, and then when I was the regional government, it was different. So I always kind of delayed the moment where I would actually have an electronic signature. This time I could not delay it anymore, so I went to the website and I said, okay, now I'm going to do it. And then I learned that I could do that I could obtain my certificate through 3 different means. It was DNIE, so ID, electronic ID, certificados electrónicos, which means electronic certificate, clave, and clave was actually, there were 2 kinds of claves, clave permanente and clave PIN. Okay, so then I said, now I'm going to know my way around because I've studied the ADAS regulation, and I've even given talks about the ADAS regulation and training. So now I know, and so I saw this and I said, okay. So what is electronic signature here, and what are the levels of certainty here? So I was kind of then the initial reaction to panic started. So I started trying of navigating the page, and there was actually no explanation whatsoever anywhere of what was the difference between one mode of identification and the other. So I said, okay, perhaps they're all exchangeable, because if they allow you to use all of them, then you can use anything, right? Then they have the same level of certainty, you can use anything. So I started my process, and then I used my DNIE, which I have in my identity card, the chip in the identity card, because when they gave it to me, they said, this is your password for the IDE. Yeah, it was back 2 years ago when I renovated it, and they gave me the ID with the chip. This is your password, and then with this you can do anything you want in the electronic administration. I had already tried to use it 3 or 4 times to do my taxes, to do several things, and every time they told me that it didn't work. So it was not. So I had just left it on the side because I didn't have the time to actually investigate what to do. So then here I said, okay, now they have changed that, so I can use anything. I tried to use my DNIE, it didn't work. I tried to use my clave, and actually it didn't work, and I was not sure if it was because I had to use the clave permanente or the clave PIN. So I said no. So then I need a certificate, certificados electrónicos, because the person on the phone had told me that was electronic signature. Otherwise, I don't know where I would have known it. That was included there. I said, okay, I think it's that. So then I went to the Casa de Papel, as Todor call it, which is basically the mint in Spain, the Spanish mint, which is the one that provides the electronic certificates. And I got to a page where they told me in English and in Spanish how to obtain an electronic certificate. I have to say that in English you have different requirements than in Spanish. I don't know why, but there was it. And then I got all these instructions, interesting instructions. So then first I realized that I could obtain a digital private individual certificate. And I was like, okay, that might be the electronic signature on the different stages. But I mean, I guess so. Then they explain to you a little bit on the top what it is. I realized that I was a private individual. So I decided to obtain it in my PC. Then the parcours des combattants started. They describe here 4 steps to get your certificate, but actually, and which are each of them have requirements. So, and they tell you what to do in each step. First, you have to configure your browser. Then you start trembling because I have a Mac, and I've always had trouble to use the Spanish administration with my Mac. I tried with my Mac, it didn't work out. Then I tried to go to see the configuration. I have to tell you that all in all, I think I've spent on this 1 week of my life full time to find out how to do my certificate. And 2 experts in electronic signing in CII Tech have spent 48 hours, especially one, have invested it in figuring out what happened and why I could not get my electronic signature. But anyway, so configuring my browser, then you have certain, if you click there, you have instructions, and you realize that you need a particular version of particular browsers for every, I mean, if you use Mac or you use PC. Okay. I know you IT experts or IT savvies might know a lot about versions of the different explorers or browsers, but not everybody in the world are knowledgeable about that. So then you realize that you have the shown instructions and you have the hidden instructions. And you realize, but this is something I learned at the end of the process, that actually there were things that I needed to know from birth, and that was the reason why I was not getting through the process. You realize that you have to adapt your browser configuration anyway. So they send you, and they have a way to adapt your browser configuration, but you have to read in detail all the instructions until you get to a point really, really small somewhere in a page that you have to adapt your browser configuration. Okay, you adapt it, and you apply for your certificate. And you finally, after 4 hours of work, you come out with a number that you have to use, a code that you have to use in the next step. The next step is to ask for an appointment for the identification, the physical identification with the different authorities in Spain. You can also do it in the consulate. So it's very convenient because they allow you to do it in the consulate. But I decided to do it in Madrid because I was going to be there anyway. So I had an appointment. I was there physically, and the lady on the desk told me, okay, here is your, it is activated. Here is the document you need. You should know that you have to do everything with the same computer. So that you learn, that's the other hidden instruction that you learn afterwards. I had needed to do it with my office computer because I was incapable to do it with a Mac. So I had to do it with my office laptop because it was impossible to do it with a Mac. So anyway, I went back to Brussels and I went to download my certificate. And when I tried to download it, it was not working. And I was like, okay, so I'm doing something wrong and I don't know where it is because this is the same computer. Perhaps I've used the other computer. Perhaps in the end I did a request with a Mac. I don't know. So I asked for help to my colleagues in CII Tech, the experts, and I had an IT engineer working full-time for me for 2 days trying to find out, calling the help desk to see what happened. And actually in the end, we found out that there was another hidden instruction that we hadn't followed. And is that you have to do the whole process in a very short period of time, because otherwise your computer refreshes and loses all the information you have downloaded the first time. Yeah, no, it's so basically I had to start the whole process again from the start. I had to ask for another appointment. I have to download the first browser. I mean, to configure the first browser. Okay, so then I did it again. I asked for the appointment again. I went to Madrid again to identify myself in person. I went back and I did everything in a very short time. So I wouldn't have that problem. And my colleague told me, especially, don't open your computer during those 24 hours, because if it starts the upgrade naturally, I mean, spontaneously, you will lose everything. So I couldn't open my computer for 24 hours. Finally, I managed myself, on my own, without any other help, to download the certificate, but I couldn't open it. Why? Because there was another hidden instruction, is that you need to adapt your browser configuration again and with different settings than the first one you have adapted. So just this is a summary of the nightmare you can have to get a certificate in Spain. I don't know if other administrations are like that, but at least it was for me. So that was the way. Now I have it. So I'm happy to tell you that I have it, and I've already used it at least once. But when I realized that I had it, I said, okay, now I can't do anything with it, right? So I went to the tax page administration, and I realized that there were 4 ways of identifying yourself, or 4 ways of doing your tax errands, and one of them was the certificado electrónico, or DNA electrónico. And I said, okay, if they allow for the use of both, why I had to do my electronic signature and my certificate, and I cannot use my ID? I don't know. Nobody explained to me that there are different levels of certainty, and then actually you only know which one you can use when you are going to do the process, and they tell you, no, this one you cannot use for this process. So you'd better have them all, because otherwise you will be in a situation where you won't be able to do your electronic errands in a page. So for the taxes, apparently you can use everything. You don't know if indistinctly, because nobody explains it to you, or what. You have all these, you realize after surfing many pages in the Spanish administration that you have all these possible ways of electronic identification or certification. You have your DNIE, you have the electronic certificate, that is called certificate, electronic certificate, or digital certificate, depending in which page you are. You have to know that it's the same thing. And nobody explains to you that that is the same thing. For a lawyer, and the rigidity we have lawyers to define, to talk about definitions and to work with definitions, this is a bit confusing, because we need to know that we are exactly on the same concept when we do something. Then you have the clave, 2 kinds of clave PIN, clave permanente. And you have others. You can, and sometimes you can identify yourself through passwords, reference numbers, information that both parties know. Anyway, to sum up, the vocabulary is misleading, because sometimes they talk about digital certificate, for example. Where is that? The ADAS regulation does not mention a digital certificate anywhere. And they use it sometimes. They use it sometimes indistinctly to talk about electronic certificate, and sometimes they talk about something else. You have a lack of clear information. You don't know which certainty level you are. You don't know why they accept certain means of identification and why not. You can assume that it's because of a level of certainty, but you don't know it beforehand, so you cannot actually choose the highest level of certainty, just naturally, spontaneously, and use one because it provides the highest level of certainty. And each entity of the public administration uses it, the one they want. So that's free choice from the entities. So just a couple of examples of a lack of clear information. This is very tiny, but it's more or less what you have seen in the previous slide. The different ways of identification they have for the tax administration. You can use 4, and they tell you can use 4, but when you start using them, you realize that they are not indistinct. And you don't know why. And until you don't get blocked and stuck, you don't know that you are not using the right one. Then there are several claves, what they call claves, and you don't know what is the difference between them. Then in the local administration, you also have the same case, basically. You have the certificate and the ID and the clave, and you don't know which one you can use when. The vocabulary is misleading. This is the sede del catastro. Basically, is the place where all the properties are recorded, and they talk about digital certificates. They tell you in the beginning that you can identify yourself with a digital certificate, or you can use your digital certificate to obtain your data or your IDE. But then when you enter and you click, they only allow you to use the certificate. So you don't know why you cannot use the ID all of a sudden. And then this is an example of the regional administration. They talk about digital certificate and not about electronic signature or about ID, electronic ID. So they use different language without actually explaining what is the difference between one and the other. And then another thing that is a bit confusing for a user, a simple user like me, who doesn't come from the unit in the Commission who actually did the EIDAS regulation, is that the EIDAS regulation allows for many different service certificate providers. And that's very good. It sounds very flexible. But then you have, this is the list of the Spanish service providers. It's very tiny. Sorry for that. But basically, I sum up what is inside. You have several kinds of entities. You have public administrations. You have professional orders. And you have regional and local administration having each one their own certificate. When you see that and you are Spanish, you say, oh, my God, I need to have the right certificate for the right administration. Otherwise, they won't accept it. So then you realize, because you have read the EIDAS regulation, that they should be accepted everywhere. So there should be mutual recognition, and you should be able to use the qualified certificate that you have obtained in the Valencian regional authority with the state authority of the whole country, or with other regional authority. But then you wonder why they have issued their own certificate. If you can use indistinctively anyone, you could also have one for the whole Spain and use it in all administrations, right? And people will not get confused about which one is which or when you can use it. And then you start getting really suspicious about the fact that they probably ask their own certificate every time to do their own errands in their own public administration. So to sum up, because I'm over time now, what would we need from you both as legal advisors working in the institution and as simple users like me? We realize that despite EIDAS, there are several instruments for electronic identification that have different denominations than the ones defined by EIDAS, and they are very difficult to identify which ones are which and which level of certainty they provide. It's very unclear, and the mutual recognition and interoperability is not always guaranteed. So what would we need from you? We would need rules leading to a tool. So I'm being very pragmatic in the approach. We need rules at a certain level of legality, if you want, in the pyramid, but also from a practical point of view, we need that they lead to a tool that it is easy to use, that shows certainty and clarity in the levels of certainty, that allows for homogeneous use. It is conceived for all users, not only for IT savvy. So you don't need an IT engineer to figure out what happened with your certificate. And it is mutually recognized by all European institutions and easily. And I will close with another personal story. I lived in Mexico 12 years ago, and I only used one certificate to do all possible errands in the administration, in the electronic administration, everything. So I dream of, in Europe, of a situation similar than the one I had in Mexico.
Thank you a lot, Maria, for this story. I think it's exactly the right subject that we actually are talking. Do you take questions? Sure. Are there any questions for Maria right now?
Been there, seen that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your attention, and then I suggest we continue with the next point, which is to clarify what we are going to do after the coffee break.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. First of all, thank you everyone being here. It's a very pleasure to have you here, because with most of you we have collaborated the past 3 months during our meetings that we had in the phase 1 of our interinstitutional committee, and it's going to be a very nice journey, in my opinion, actually, because Maria, with her excellent keynote speech, identified and highlighted all the problems that we're facing. because the problems that the European citizens are facing at the end of the day are being reflected to our institutions. For instance, Maria, I will start. I have kept some notes here, and Maria highlighted that there is a problem on the definition of the IDAS regulation that is going to be tailored and applicable to the European Union institutions, agencies and bodies. And this is something that we are lacking, and this is the purpose of this interinstitutional committee. Going further to her presentation, we saw that each member state or entity, let's say, the member states, commission, parliament, and so on, they have completely different legislative and non-legislative procedures, which are not harmonized and not homogeneous in the context of our day-to-day business. Later on, we figure out that for the trust service providers in Spain, we saw that there are so many trust service providers that to the non-IT tech-savvy, let's say, persons, doesn't make any sense. Not to mention that all of this frustration, at the end of the day, will end up in our entities, to people like you and us, that we have to deal with documents that we are receiving from all of the member states and European citizens. And at the end of the day, what we would like to have, we would like to have a homogeneous approach across not only inside the EU IBAs, but with the interaction with European citizens. And if we manage to establish some rules that are applicable internally in our institutions, the next step is actually to go and publicize these results to the member states in order to try to build better communication bridges. So I'm going to stop here, this short introduction, in order to remind what we need to do, how we are going to do it, and who is going to do it. So just to refresh your memory, according to the mandate that we have in this interinstitutional committee, we need to deliver the legal proposal, the proposal for the legal regulation that is going to be applicable for our EU IBAs. The second artifact that we need to deliver is the technical recommendation and guidelines on how these legal, let's say, provisions or proposals could be realized, as well as provide something like a service catalog, proposed solutions, proposed tools and services that already exist in our ecosystem that can be used, reused, or even extend, but from whoever feels like going towards that direction. So in order to do that, in order to deliver these artifacts, you need to bear in mind that our job is going to be based on the requirements. Till now, we have built a list of requirements that are high level, tailored to our business needs, and hopefully they are concrete, solid, and cover most, if not all, of the aspects of our day-to-day business. This was a process that took us 3 meetings between September and today in order to finalize them, in order to try to finalize them, let's say, but mostly in order to prepare a very good list that today we're going to discuss all together. How we're going to discuss it all together? The idea that all of us agreed from the steering committee is that because we do have 2 different streams, the legal one and the ICT security, we would like you to blend each other. The point of view and the perspective of participants of the legal stream might be different or completely different than the perspective and the point of view of the participants of the ICT security working group, which have completely different background, completely different mindset. And today, actually, we are going to split ourselves in 4 corners. We have the Alpha corner there that I'm going to be moderating. We have the Omega corner, the Beta, Vita, and Gamma, correct? C. I'm sorry, I don't remember. I have it in front of me, sorry. We have the Alpha corner, the Gamma corner, the Psi corner, and the Omega corner. So how we are going to do it? We are going to mix, as I said before, the participants of the two different work streams in order to elaborate on the requirements that we have already prepared for each corner. Due to the time constraints, we don't have the time to all of these work groups to deal with all the requirements. So each corner has a set of requirements that all of us, would need to brainstorm, and we need to answer some questions that are already predefined. How we are going to do it? The four of us, Luis, myself, Todor, and Kelly, are going to moderate each of these work groups. Myself, I'm going to moderate the Alpha group, and we are going to go through the requirements one by one and try to figure out whether, first of all, this requirement, the way it is drafted, makes sense and brings all of us on the same page. Because, according to our opinion, we cannot meet our requirement, we cannot meet our milestones if we are not on the same page. So, in order to be constructive, the deliverable of the day, the outcome of the day, that all of us will need to have in mind is that the requirements list that we are going to draft at the end of the day is going to be self-evident, self-explanatory, and crystal clear for everybody. Because these requirements are going to be the basis of our job for the next 3 months. And if there are ambiguities and the focus and the target is not crystal clear to everybody, I'm pretty sure, we are pretty sure, that we are not going to meet our goal. So I don't want to take more time. I think my time is about to finish. And we can proceed to the coffee break, unless you have some questions that I can answer. Yes. Yeah, I will say it. Any questions? And I just had a very good remark from my colleague Todor, that as soon as we formulate the work groups in these 4 corners, one of you is going to be the speaker. So myself, I'm going to be the timekeeper, I'm going to be the moderator, but one of you is going to be the speaker. Because later on, around 2:30, the speaker of each work group is going to present the work that we will do after our coffee break. So please, we are not going to assign now the speakers, we are not going to assign now the work groups. This is something that we are going to do on the spot. As soon as we gather to our corners, we decide collectively who is going to be the speaker and of each work group. And I'm wishing you a very pleasant coffee break. We're going to display the members now?
of each group, not the speakers, the members.
Do we have them? We have them. Is there a group?
Yes.
Is there a slide?
Yes.
Okay, this is the last minute input.
This is what
Yes. Moderator.
That's it.
Perfect. So it's not going to be a random assignment of the attendees of each work group. So for the Alpha group, Psi and Gamma and Omega group, you can see your names there. So please, after the coffee break, position yourself to the proper working group, and we're going to let this slide on the beamer in order to make it easier for us and for everybody to gather to our corners. Okay?
Maybe to add, so these lists have been, we created it based on who registered. So it could be that, so if we end up with uneven groups, don't hesitate to move to another one. And if you don't see your name, choose a group.
Depending on the preference on the alphabet that you have. Any more questions? Is it clear what we need to do today? Yes, please.
Now, in relation to the groups, I was thinking maybe you could check in advance if there's a balance between the groups, because I see in Alpha group, for example, I see Andrea Servida, my colleague Grażyna, and myself, so 2 are missing. So maybe you should... We should, exactly, maybe we should check for example, just we could raise the hands and count to see how many we have in alpha, how many we have in beta, psi, and gamma, and just to, I don't know, just a suggestion, to make sure that we have like balanced groups, at least in terms of numbers, to avoid that we end up with only 2 people or something like that.
I think this is a relevant suggestion. What is the most important thing for us is for sure to have at least one legal expert and at least one ICT security expert in each group, and then of course to have different profiles. However, if you see your name in the alpha group, could you please raise your hand? So we have about 6 people. If you see psi group, your name, we have 5, 6. Gamma, we have only 3, 4. And omega, there are 4. Then everybody who don't see your name, could you please raise your hand? 3, 4. So please join any group that you see that it's doesn't have enough people. But I think we are more or less good.
Gamma and omega.
Yeah,
because if I count correctly, 2 persons can go to gamma group and 2 persons can go to the omega group in order to have a bit of balance. Okay?
Yeah. So basically the idea is that the speaker will present later the highlights that has been discussed during the working group. But as Tolis already said, it will be each group deciding on the speaker.
And we are pretty sure, or almost sure, that perhaps we are going to have, let's say, non-conclusive the answers on the requirements, on the questions regarding the requirements. Please don't hesitate to raise the points. Please don't hesitate to have a constructive debate with your colleagues. And in case, as moderators, we figure out that there's no conclusive answer regarding a requirement, this is going to be addressed later on after the second coffee break around 3:45. The goal of today's exercise is to come up with 90%, let's say, coverage of the requirements in terms of clarity and in terms of applicability and relevance to our day-to-day job. Because this backlog, let's say, if I may use this terminology, is going to be used in order to start working in phase 2, because there we are going to actually tackle requirement by requirement and figure out which might be the legal provisions that need to be drafted in order to propose a regulation, a legal regulation. And the second part, the technical recommendations and guidelines that need to be drafted in order to tackle these requirements and support the operation side, let's say, of this high-level requirement. Okay? Any more questions? Is it crystal clear who's joining which group later on after our coffee break? Okay, let's go for a coffee.
If the coffee is here, let's check.
Or for a water, that water is here.